The ice broke beneath Felicity Morrison's feet with a sound like a gunshot. And in the span of a heartbeat, the freezing waters of the Pecos River swallowed her whole. It was January 1878 in New Mexico territory, and she had been foolish enough to trust the frozen surface when her horse spooked at a rattlesnake that should have been hibernating. The animal bolted, leaving her stranded on the wrong side of the river, miles from the nearest settlement. She had thought to cross on foot, to save time, to reach Santa Fe before nightfall. Now, as the current dragged her under the shelf of ice, all she could think was that she would die alone, and no one would ever know what became of her. The cold was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It seized her lungs, her limbs, her very thoughts. She tried to scream, but water filled her mouth. She tried to swim, but her heavy wool traveling dress pulled her down like an anchor. The world above the ice became a blur of white and gray, and then her vision began to darken at the edges. She did not see the man who rode along the riverbank, did not hear him shout when he spotted her beneath the ice. She did not feel him dive into the water after her, risking his own life to grab hold of her dress and haul her toward the hole where she had fallen through. By the time Nathan Murphy pulled her onto solid ground, Felicity Morrison had gone completely still. Nathan did not waste time checking for a pulse. He had seen enough near drownings to know that every second counted. He threw her over his horse, mounted behind her, and rode hard toward his cabin 2 miles upstream. The wind cut through his wet clothes like knives, and his teeth chattered so hard he thought they might crack, but he kept riding. The woman in his arms was pale as death, her lips blue, her skin like ice. His cabin appeared through the snow like a blessing. He had built it himself 3 years ago after returning from a cattle drive to Texas with enough money to finally settle down. It was small but solid, with a good fireplace and a tight roof. He kicked the door open and carried the woman inside, laying her on the floor near the hearth. His hands shook as he built up the fire, throwing on log after log until the flames roared. Then he turned to the woman and began the grim work of saving her life. Her dress was frozen stiff, and he had to cut it away with his knife. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, rubbing her arms and legs to restore circulation. Her breathing was so shallow he had to put his ear to her mouth to be sure she was still alive. The hours that followed blurred together. He heated water and wrapped hot stones in cloth, placing them around her body. He held her against his chest, sharing his warmth. He prayed, though he was not a particularly religious man, bargaining with God for the life of this stranger. Sometime near midnight, she began to shiver. Nathan nearly wept with relief. Shivering meant her body was warming, fighting back. He held her tighter, murmuring encouragements he was not sure she could hear. It was then, in the firelight, that he truly looked at her face. She was beautiful, with delicate features and dark hair that had come loose from its pins. But more than that, there was something about her that called to him, some quality he could not name. He found himself wondering who she was, where she had come from, whether anyone was waiting for her. In his delirium from exhaustion and cold, Nathan did something he would later struggle to explain, even to himself. He reached for the gold ring he wore on a chain around his neck, the ring that had belonged to his mother, intended for the woman he would someday marry. He slipped it onto the woman's finger. Perhaps he thought she would die, and he wanted her to pass from this world as someone's beloved. Perhaps he was out of his mind with cold and fear. Or perhaps, on some level deeper than reason, he already knew that this woman would change everything. When Felicity opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was rough, hewn timber ceiling beams. The second thing she noticed was warmth, blessed warmth, and the crackling sound of a fire. The third thing was the unfamiliar weight on her left hand. She lifted her arm, squinting in the dim light. A gold wedding band gleamed on her fourth finger. Panic seized her. She sat up too quickly and the room spun. She was naked beneath a pile of blankets in a cabin she did not recognize, wearing a ring she had never seen before. What had happened? Where was she? Easy now. A man's voice, rough but gentle, came from across the room. You have been through hell and back. Do not move too fast. Felicity clutched the blankets to her chest and turned toward the voice. A man sat in a chair near the door, watching her with concerned eyes. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard on his jaw. His clothes were rumpled as if he had slept in them, and exhaustion lined his face. "Who are you?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Where am I? What is this?" She held up her hand, the ring catching the firelight. The man stood slowly, keeping his distance as if approaching a skittish horse. "My name is Nathan Murphy. This is my cabin about 15 miles south of Santa Fe. I pulled you out of the Pecos River yesterday morning. You were under the ice. I thought you were going to die." Memory came flooding back. The crack of ice, the water closing over her head, the terrible cold. She raised a shaking hand to her face. "You saved my life. I did what anyone would do." He moved to the fireplace, ladling something from a pot that hung over the flames. "You need to drink this. It is just broth, but you need something in your stomach." She accepted the cup he offered, careful to keep the blankets wrapped around herself. The broth was hot and salty and tasted better than anything she could remember. "Thank you," she said after a few sips. "Truly, I owe you everything." She paused, looking down at the ring again. "But I do not understand this. Why am I wearing a wedding ring?" Nathan's jaw tightened. He looked away and she saw color rise in his cheeks. "I put it there," he said quietly. "Last night when I thought you might not survive. I was not thinking clearly. I apologize. It belonged to my mother. I have been carrying it for years, waiting for the right woman to give it to." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly embarrassed. "I cannot explain it exactly. You were dying in my arms, and I could not bear the thought of you leaving this world alone, unclaimed. So I claimed you. It was foolish. I am sorry." Felicity stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. It was the strangest, most intimate thing anyone had ever done for her, and yet there was something almost unbearably tender about it. This man, this stranger, had tried to give her his name, his protection, even in death. "What is your name?" Nathan asked, breaking the silence. "Felicity Morrison. I was traveling to Santa Fe from Amarillo, Texas. My horse threw me when a snake spooked him, and I thought I could cross the river on the ice." She shook her head at her own foolishness. "I should have known better. We all make mistakes." He hesitated, then added, "I can take you to Santa Fe as soon as you are strong enough to travel. You must have family waiting for you." "No family," she said quietly. "My parents died last year of fever. I was going to Santa Fe to take a position as a teacher. The school board hired me based on my letters." She touched the ring again. "I have no one." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding born of shared loneliness. Nathan had built his life in this isolated cabin, and Felicity had been traveling toward a new beginning, both of them alone in the world. "You should rest more," Nathan said, breaking eye contact. "I will be outside if you need anything. There are some clothes on the chair. They are mine, so they will not fit well, but they are clean and dry. Your dress was ruined. I am sorry." After he left, Felicity sat for a long moment, staring at the ring on her finger. Then, slowly, she pulled it off and set it on the small table beside the bed. She told herself she was just being practical, that it would be wrong to wear another person's ring, even temporarily. But as she dressed in Nathan's oversized shirt and trousers, rolling up the sleeves and cuffs, she could not stop glancing at the band of gold gleaming in the firelight. The next 3 days passed in a strange domestic rhythm. Nathan was attentive but reserved, bringing her food, stoking the fire, checking her fingers and toes for signs of frostbite. Felicity grew stronger each day, though her limbs still ached and her throat was raw from the river water she had swallowed. She insisted on helping with chores, and Nathan did not stop her, perhaps sensing that she needed to feel useful. They talked while they worked. Nathan told her about his life, how he had come west after the war, how he had worked as a ranch hand and trail driver before saving enough to buy this land. Felicity spoke of growing up in Amarillo, of teaching her younger siblings to read before the fever took them all, of her determination to continue teaching even though it meant traveling alone into uncertain territory. "You are brave," Nathan said one evening as they sat by the fire after supper. "Not many women would make that journey alone." "I did not feel brave when I was drowning," Felicity replied. She had been studying him across the flames, noticing the way the firelight caught in his dark eyes, the gentleness in his work-roughened hands. "I felt terrified. I thought it was the end." But it was not the end. His gaze held hers. Maybe it was a beginning. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Felicity's heart began to pound. In 3 days she had come to know this man better than people she had known her whole life. She had seen his kindness, his strength, his loneliness that mirrored her own. And she had felt something growing inside her, something warm and frightening and wonderful. "Nathan," she began, but he stood abruptly. "I should check on the horses," he said, grabbing his coat and heading for the door. Felicity sat alone by the fire, frustration and confusion warring inside her. She knew he felt something too. She had seen it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, in the careful way he avoided touching her, as if he did not trust himself. That night, she made a decision. She retrieved the ring from where she had left it on the table and slipped it back onto her finger. When Nathan came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots, he froze at the sight of her standing by the fire, his ring gleaming on her hand. "Felicity," he said, his voice strained. "What are you doing?" "I am making a choice." She crossed the small room until she stood before him. "You gave me this ring when you thought I was dying. You claimed me. Well, now I am claiming you. You do not know what you are saying. You have been through a terrible ordeal. Your thinking is not clear. My thinking has never been clearer." She reached up, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. "In 3 days, I have come to know you, Nathan Murphy. I have seen your goodness, your courage, your lonely heart. I was traveling toward an uncertain future in Santa Fe, toward a job teaching other people's children, toward a life alone. But now I have found something else. Someone else. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then we are both fools to let it go." "I pulled you from a frozen river," he said roughly. "You think you love me because I saved your life, but gratitude is not the same as love. Is that what you think this is? Gratitude?" She took his hand and pressed it against her cheek. "I am grateful, yes. But what I feel when I look at you has nothing to do with the river. I feel like I have been searching my whole life for something I could not name, and now I have found it. I feel like I am home." Nathan made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. His other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "I put that ring on your finger because I could not bear to lose you, even though I had only just found you. In that moment, I knew you were meant to be mine." "Then claim me again," she whispered. "Not because I am dying, but because I am alive. Because we are both alive and we have been given a chance that most people never get." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses Felicity had received from suitors in Amarillo. This kiss was fierce and hungry and full of desperate longing, as if Nathan was trying to pour everything he felt into that single moment of connection. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have nothing to offer you," he said. "Just this cabin, this land, and a life that will be hard and lonely at times. You could go to Santa Fe, teach school, have a comfortable life in town. I do not want comfort if it means living without you." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Marry me, Nathan Murphy. Truly marry me. Make me your wife in every way. You are already wearing my ring," he said, a smile finally breaking through. "I suppose that is a start." They rode to Santa Fe the next morning, both mounted on Nathan's horse, Felicity sitting in front of him with his arms around her waist. She had sent word to the school board that she would not be taking the teaching position, explaining that her circumstances had changed dramatically. The letter had been brief and professional, but inside Felicity felt giddy with the enormity of what she was doing. She was marrying a man she had known for less than a week. It was madness. It was perfect. The priest at the small adobe church in Santa Fe raised his eyebrows when they explained the situation, but he agreed to marry them. There were no guests, no flowers, no elaborate ceremony. Just two people standing before God, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When Nathan kissed her at the altar, Felicity felt tears streaming down her face. She had lost everything to fever and freezing water, and now she had gained everything in the arms of a man who had pulled her back from death itself. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Santa Fe, a luxury Nathan insisted on even though it cost dearly. He was gentle with Felicity, patient and loving, making her first time as beautiful as she had always dreamed it would be. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Felicity traced the ring on her finger, marveling at how it caught the moonlight streaming through the window. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, his voice drowsy. "Happier than I knew was possible." She kissed his shoulder. "Are you?" "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." He tightened his arms around her. "That you are a dream. I am very real." She bit his earlobe gently to prove her point, making him laugh. "And I am yours, forever." The ride back to the cabin the next day felt different. Now it was their cabin, their land, their life together. Nathan pointed out landmarks as they rode, telling her stories about the territory, about the neighbors scattered across the vast landscape, about the plans he had for expanding the ranch. "I have been saving to buy cattle," he said. "Good breeding stock. I want to build something real here, something lasting. It will be hard work, long hours, but if we are careful, we can make a good life." "We will make a wonderful life," Felicity corrected him. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Together, we can do anything." The winter passed in a blur of domestic contentment. Felicity learned to cook over the fireplace, to churn butter, to mend clothes and split kindling. Nathan taught her to ride his horses, to shoot a rifle, to read the weather in the shape of the clouds. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, their passion for each other growing deeper with every passing week. In February, Nathan rode to the neighboring ranch, the Jensen place, to help with a difficult calving. He came home with news that spread a glow through Felicity's chest. "Mrs. Jensen is looking for help with her children," he said. "She heard you were a teacher and wondered if you might be willing to come a few days a week. There are 4 children and the nearest school is 2 days' ride." Felicity agreed immediately, delighted at the chance to use her skills. Soon she was riding to the Jensen place 3 times a week, teaching not just the Jensen children but several others from nearby ranches. Word spread quickly that there was a teacher in the area, and families who had been struggling to educate their children on their own jumped at the opportunity. By spring, Felicity had a dozen students ranging in age from 6 to 14. She held classes in the Jensens' large front room, and parents paid what they could, sometimes in money, more often in goods. Nathan built her a small desk and helped her order books from a catalog. Teaching gave Felicity a sense of purpose beyond her marriage, though she loved Nathan more with each passing day. In April, Felicity began to feel sick in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for a week, then two, she began to suspect the truth. She was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. He was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease, and she was mending one of his shirts. It was a scene of perfect domestic tranquility, and Felicity wanted to remember this moment forever. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I am going to have a baby." His hands stilled. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor, but I know. I feel different." He set down the knife and wood and pulled her into his lap, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered into her hair. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" She pulled back to see his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. His eyes were wet. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, a family, a real home. And now I have all of it. You gave me all of it." "We gave it to each other," Felicity corrected him. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "This baby is proof that we were meant to survive that river, meant to find each other. This is our future, Nathan. This is the life we almost did not get to have." The pregnancy was difficult. Felicity was sick constantly for the first few months, and then as summer arrived, the heat made her swell and ache. She had to stop teaching in July, unable to make the ride to the Jensen place. Nathan hovered over her anxiously, bringing her cool water, fanning her with a piece of canvas, doing everything in his power to make her comfortable. "I am fine," she kept telling him, even when she did not feel fine at all. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong." "I know you are strong." He kissed her forehead. "But I nearly lost you once. I cannot go through that again." In early October, the pain started. Nathan rode hard to fetch Mrs. Jensen, who had helped deliver dozens of babies over the years. The labor was long and agonizing, and there were moments when Nathan stood outside the cabin, unable to bear listening to Felicity's cries, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. But when the sun rose the next morning, Felicity held a tiny, perfect baby boy in her arms. Nathan knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son, this miracle, this proof that love could create life. "What should we name him?" Felicity asked, exhausted but glowing with joy. Nathan thought of all the people who had shaped his life, the mother who had given him the ring he had placed on Felicity's finger, the father who had taught him to work hard and live honestly. But in the end, he chose to look forward rather than back. "River," he said. "We should name him River. Because that is where our story began, where I found you and brought you home. He is our new beginning." Felicity smiled. "River Murphy, I like it. It is strong like his father, Mrs. Jensen stayed for 3 days, helping Felicity learn to nurse the baby, making sure both mother and child were healthy. When she finally left, she hugged Felicity tightly. "You are a natural mother," she said, "and your husband looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. You are blessed, Felicity Murphy." Felicity knew it was true. Against all odds, against death itself, she had found a love so deep and true it took her breath away. She had a husband who cherished her, a son who filled her heart to bursting, and a future stretching out before them full of possibility. The first year of River's life passed in the exhausting, beautiful blur of new parenthood. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby when he cried at night, making silly faces to earn his smiles, teaching him to grip his finger with tiny hands. Felicity marveled at the sight of her strong, quiet husband reduced to baby talk and tender lullabies. In the spring, Nathan bought his first cattle, 5 breeding cows and a bull. It was a small start, but it was a start. He worked from dawn to dusk, building fences, digging wells, clearing brush. Felicity helped when she could, often with River strapped to her back in a sling she had sewn herself. They struggled financially, sometimes going to bed hungry so that River would have enough milk. But they never complained, never regretted their choices. They had each other, and that was more than enough. When River was 2 years old, Felicity became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1881, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Sarah, after Nathan's mother. Nathan wept when Felicity told him the name she had chosen, overcome by the gesture. With 2 children, life became even more chaotic and wonderful. The cattle herd had grown to 20 head, and Nathan hired a young man from Santa Fe to help with the work. Felicity returned to teaching, holding classes twice a week in her own cabin now, with her children playing at her feet while she instructed the older students. The years rolled by, each one bringing new challenges and joys. River grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to read and help his father with the ranch. Sarah was all fire and mischief, climbing trees and chasing chickens and asking endless questions. In 1884, Felicity gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named James and Thomas. Nathan built an addition onto the cabin to accommodate their growing family. Through it all, through sleepless nights and tight finances, through droughts and hard winters, Nathan and Felicity's love never wavered. If anything, it grew deeper, tempered by the fires of daily life into something unbreakable. One evening, when the children were finally asleep and they had a rare moment of quiet, Felicity sat beside Nathan on the porch and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me out of that river. Your life would be easier if I had never come along." Nathan turned to her, his expression fierce. "Do not ever say that, not even in jest. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You and these children are the reason I wake up every morning. You are the reason I work so hard, the reason I believe in something bigger than myself." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Felicity Murphy. I loved you from the moment I pulled you from that water, and I will love you until the day I die." She kissed him then, pouring 10 years of love and gratitude and passion into that kiss. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for claiming me. Thank you for giving me this life." As the years continued to pass, the Murphy Ranch prospered. Nathan's careful management and tireless work paid off, and by 1890, they owned over 200 head of cattle and several good horses. They hired more hands, built a larger house to replace the old cabin, and became respected members of the community. Felicity's informal school grew until the county finally built an official schoolhouse nearby and hired her as the teacher, paying a real salary. River, now 12, was already helping his father run the ranch, proving to have a natural talent for working with animals. Sarah, at 9, had declared her intention to become a doctor, much to everyone's surprise and delight. The twins were 7, constantly getting into trouble and keeping their parents on their toes. In 1892, Felicity turned 32 and Nathan turned 36. They were no longer the desperate young people who had found each other in a frozen river, but they still looked at each other with the same intensity, the same devotion. Their hair had threads of gray now, and their hands were calloused from years of hard work, but their love had only grown richer. One cold January morning, 14 years after Nathan had pulled Felicity from the ice, they rode out together to the spot where it had happened. The children were old enough now to be left with the ranch hands for a few hours, and Felicity had wanted to see the place again, to remember. They stood on the riverbank, watching the water flow beneath a thin crust of ice. The landscape looked different in daylight, without the snow and panic, but Felicity could still feel the echo of that terrible cold, that moment when she had thought her life was ending. "I was so scared," she said quietly, holding Nathan's hand. "I thought I was going to die alone, that my life would mean nothing, and then you came. I almost did not see you." Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. "I had been checking my traps upstream and was heading home. If I had left 5 minutes earlier or later, if I had taken a different path." He shook his head. "It does not bear thinking about. But you did see me. You risked your life to save mine." She turned to face him, this man who had given her everything. "And then you gave me your mother's ring, even though you thought I would never wake up. Why did you really do it, Nathan?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the river. When he finally spoke, his words were measured. "I think part of me knew even then. I looked at your face and something in my heart recognized you. I could not let you go into the dark alone. I had to claim you to make you mine, even if only for those last moments." He met her eyes. "And then you lived. You lived and you chose me back. You did not have to. You could have thanked me and moved on to Santa Fe, started your new life. But you stayed. I stayed because I belonged with you." Felicity touched the ring on her finger, worn smooth by 14 years of wear. "This ring has never left my hand since that day I put it back on. It is part of me now, just like you are part of me." Nathan pulled her close, and they stood together on the riverbank, two souls who had defied death to find each other. The wind was cold, but they were warm in each other's arms, proof that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions. As they rode back to the ranch, Felicity thought about everything that had grown from that terrible, wonderful day. 4 children, a thriving ranch, a community of friends and neighbors, a love that had withstood every test. All of it had started with one man's decision to dive into freezing water, to risk everything for a stranger. When they arrived home, the children came running out to greet them, talking over each other in their excitement to tell their parents about their day. River had helped birth a calf. Sarah had read an entire book on anatomy that Felicity had ordered for her. The twins had built an elaborate fort in the barn and wanted their parents to come see it immediately. Nathan dismounted and swept the twins up in his arms, making them shriek with laughter. Felicity hugged River and Sarah, breathing in the smell of their hair, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for this noisy, chaotic, perfect life. That night, after the children were in bed, Nathan found Felicity in the kitchen, washing the supper dishes. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky we are." She turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. "How I almost missed all of this. But you did not miss it." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "You are here. We are here. And we have so much more ahead of us." He was right, of course. They had decades ahead of them, years of watching their children grow and have families of their own. In time, River would take over the ranch, proving to be an even better cattleman than his father. Sarah would indeed become a doctor, one of the first women physicians in New Mexico territory. The twins would start a freight business together, hauling goods between Santa Fe and points west. All 4 children would make their parents proud, but all of that was still in the future. For now, Nathan and Felicity simply held each other in the quiet kitchen, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of their children sleeping. They did not need words to communicate what they felt. After 14 years together, they could read each other's thoughts with a glance. As the new century approached, bringing with it automobiles and electric lights and all manner of modern marvels, Nathan and Felicity remained rooted in the land they had built together. The ranch continued to thrive, and they became pillars of their community, known for their generosity and strong marriage. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1898, their children threw them a surprise party, inviting neighbors from miles around. The house was packed with people, all of them wanting to celebrate the couple who had become something of a local legend. Everyone knew the story of how Nathan had pulled Felicity from the frozen river, how she had woken up wearing his ring, how they had married within a week and built a life that was the envy of the territory. During the party, Nathan pulled Felicity outside for a moment of quiet. The stars were brilliant overhead, and music and laughter drifted from the house behind them. 20 years, Nathan said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. I know exactly what you mean. Felicity touched his face, tracing the lines that had not been there when they met. You are even more handsome now than you were then, he laughed. You are a terrible liar, but I love you for it. Then his expression grew serious. Do you have any regrets, Felicity? Any dreams you gave up to be here with me? Not a single one. She said it firmly, wanting him to believe her. I thought I was going to Santa Fe to teach other people's children to live some sort of independent life. But this, Nathan, this is so much better than anything I could have imagined. I got to teach dozens of children over the years, including our own. I got a partner, a true partner who respects me and loves me and builds me up. I got this land, this community, this beautiful family. How could I possibly regret any of it? I just want to make sure you are happy. I am so happy I could burst. She pulled him down for a kiss, not caring if their guests could see them through the windows. You gave me everything, Nathan Murphy. You saved my life, and then you filled it with love. Inside the house, River stood at the window, watching his parents kiss in the starlight. Sarah came up beside him, following his gaze. They are so in love, Sarah said with the slight embarrassment of a teenager talking about her parents' affection. They are, River agreed. Father says Mother is the strongest person he has ever met. He tells me that if I am lucky enough to find a woman half as wonderful as her, I should hold on tight and never let go. What do you think they are talking about out there? Thomas asked, joining his siblings at the window. Probably about how they met, James suggested. Father loves telling that story. The four children watched their parents for a moment longer, then returned to the party. But they carried with them the image of their parents' enduring love, a model that would shape their own relationships in years to come. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Nathan and Felicity climbed the stairs to their bedroom, both exhausted but content. They changed into nightclothes in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of long familiarity. In bed, Felicity curled into Nathan's side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This was her favorite place in the world, this safe harbor in her husband's arms. Nathan, she said softly, promise me something, anything. Promise me that no matter how many years we have left, we will never take this for granted. This love, this life we built. Promise me we will remember how precious it is. He tightened his arms around her. I promise. Every single day I wake up and thank God for that frozen river, for being in the right place at the right time, for having the courage to jump in after you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Felicity. I will never forget that. She smiled against his chest. I love you. I love you more. Impossible, she murmured, already drifting towards sleep. The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew up and moved out, starting families of their own. River married a sweet girl from Santa Fe and brought her home to the ranch. Sarah went east to medical school, then returned to open a practice in town. The twins married sisters and built houses on opposite ends of their freight company's main yard. Nathan and Felicity became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. Their house was always full of children and noise and laughter. They aged gracefully, their hair going white, their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. On January 15th, 1908, exactly 30 years after Nathan had pulled Felicity from the Pecos River, they rode out together to the spot once more. It had become a tradition, this annual pilgrimage to the place where their story began. They were both 50 years old now, no longer young but not yet old, still vital and engaged with life. They stood on the familiar riverbank, holding hands, watching the winter water flow. There was less ice than there had been 30 years ago, or perhaps they were just remembering it as more dramatic than it actually was. 30 years, Felicity said softly. More than half our lives spent together. The best years of my life, Nathan replied. Every single one of them. She turned to face him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. His face was lined now, his hair white, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had always held. If you could go back, she asked, to that day 30 years ago, knowing everything that would happen, all the struggles and joys and sorrows, would you still jump in after me? He did not hesitate. Without question. I would jump in 1,000 times, in a frozen river or a lake of fire if it meant having you in my life. You are my heart, Felicity. You always have been. She kissed him there on the riverbank, the same fierce passion in that kiss as there had been in their first kiss all those years ago. Some things never changed. Some loves never faded. They returned home to find their house full of family. The children had organized a surprise party to celebrate the 30th anniversary of their parents' meeting. There was food and music and 3 generations of Murphys crowding into every room. River stood up and called for silence. I want to make a toast, he announced, raising his glass. 30 years ago today, my father did something crazy. He dove into a frozen river to save a woman he had never met. He brought her home, and when he thought she might die, he put his mother's wedding ring on her finger. It was an act of faith, of hope, of pure love. And because of that act, all of us are here today. My father and mother built something extraordinary, not just this ranch, but a family, a legacy. They showed us what real love looks like. It is not just the grand gestures, though there were plenty of those. It is also the small, daily acts of kindness and devotion. It is choosing each other every single day for 30 years. So I ask you all to raise your glasses to Nathan and Felicity Murphy. 2 people who proved that sometimes the craziest decisions turn out to be the wisest ones. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Felicity was crying, and Nathan had to blink rapidly to clear his own eyes. They looked around at their children, their grandchildren, all these lives that had come from their union, and felt overwhelmed with the magnitude of what they had created. Sarah stood next, holding her own glass. Mother, you taught me that women could do anything they set their minds to. You showed me that marriage did not mean giving up your dreams, but rather finding someone to dream with. Father, you showed me what a good man looks like. You set the standard impossibly high for any man who might want to court me. This earned a laugh from the crowd. But seriously, thank you both for showing us that love is real, that it lasts, that it is worth fighting for. Here is to 30 more years. More cheers, more toasts. The twins told embarrassing stories from their childhood. Grandchildren performed a little play they had written about the day Grandpa rescued Grandma from the river, complete with blue face paint to represent the frozen water. It was chaotic and perfect, exactly the kind of celebration Nathan and Felicity loved. Late that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Nathan and Felicity sat in their rocking chairs on the porch, bundled in blankets against the January cold. The stars were bright overhead and the night was peaceful. "That was quite a party," Felicity said. "Our children did well." Nathan reached over and took her hand. "They are good people, Felicity. We raised them right." "We did." She squeezed his hand. "And they will raise their children right too. The legacy continues." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Nathan said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About that day, 30 years ago. About how close we came to never having any of this. If the ice had not broken where I could see you, if I had hesitated even a moment before jumping in, if I had not been able to pull you out." He shook his head. "There are so many ways this could have gone differently. But it did not." Felicity lifted their joined hands and kissed his knuckles. "We were meant to find each other, Nathan. I truly believe that. The universe conspired to bring us together, and nothing could have stopped it." "You believe in fate?" He sounded curious rather than skeptical. "I believe in us," she said simply. "I believe that some people are meant to be together, and when they find each other, everything else falls into place. We were lucky, yes, but we also worked hard. We chose each other every day. That is not fate. That is love." Nathan pulled her chair closer to his so he could put his arm around her. "I choose you," he said softly. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after, I will always choose you. And I will always choose you." They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, then climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving slowly, their bodies feeling every one of their 50 years. But when they climbed into bed and found each other in the darkness, they were young again, full of the same passion and tenderness that had always defined their relationship. The next 15 years passed in a blur of contentment. Nathan officially retired from running the ranch, turning it over to River, though he still helped out when he could. Felicity finally stopped teaching at 60, deciding it was time to let younger people take over. They spent their days puttering around the house, visiting with grandchildren, and taking long rides through the countryside they loved. In 1918, when the Great War ended and the whole country celebrated, Nathan and Felicity held their own quiet celebration. They were 60 years old, married for 40 years, and still deeply, desperately in love. "We made it," Felicity said, raising a glass of wine in the privacy of their living room. "Through everything, we made it." "We did more than just make it," Nathan corrected her. "We thrived. We built something beautiful." She smiled at him, this man who had been her whole world for 4 decades. "Do you remember the first thing I said to you after I woke up in your cabin? You asked who I was and what the ring meant. And do you remember what you told me?" "I said I had claimed you," he grinned. "It was terribly presumptuous. It was perfect." She set down her wine glass and came to sit on his lap, something she had not done in years. He wrapped his arms around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You claimed me when I was lost and alone and dying. You gave me your name, your home, your heart, and I claimed you right back. We have been claiming each other ever since." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured into her hair, "jumping into that river. Best decision I ever made, putting that ring back on." She held up her hand, the gold band still gleaming after all these years. "I am yours, Nathan Murphy, forever and always." "And I am yours," he replied, "forever and always." They remained healthy and active well into their 60s, defying the expectations for people their age. They took daily walks, tended a large garden, and remained engaged with their community. But in the winter of 1923, Nathan caught pneumonia. He was 70 years old, and despite Felicity's frantic nursing and Sarah's medical expertise, he did not improve. The whole family gathered at the house, sensing that the end was near. Nathan lay in bed, struggling to breathe, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had come to say goodbye. But when the room finally emptied in the early hours of the morning, only Felicity remained, holding his hand as she had held it for 45 years. "I am not ready," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am not ready to let you go." Nathan's grip on her hand was weak, but it was still there. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible, "but I need to tell you something important. Save your strength. No, I need you to hear this." He took a shallow breath. "That day I pulled you from the river, I knew. I knew you were meant to be mine. When I put that ring on your finger, I made a promise to you, even though you could not hear it. I promised that I would love you for the rest of my life, that I would protect you and cherish you and make you happy. Did I keep that promise, Felicity? Did I make you happy?" She was sobbing now, unable to speak, but she nodded fiercely. "Good. That is all I wanted, to make you happy, to give you a life worth living." Another rattling breath. "And you gave me everything. You gave me joy and purpose and a family I never dreamed I would have. You made every day an adventure. I have no regrets, Felicity, not a single one." "I love you," she managed to say through her tears. "I love you so much, I know, and I love you. I will always love you. Death cannot change that." His eyes were starting to close. "Promise me you will be happy. Promise me you will keep living, keep finding joy." "I promise," she whispered, though she could not imagine joy without him. "Thank you," he breathed, "for everything, for choosing me, for loving me, for 45 years of happiness." His hand squeezed hers one last time. "Find me in the next life, Felicity. I will be waiting for you." And then he was gone, his chest still, his hand going limp in hers. Felicity held him and wept, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. He had been her everything, her whole world, and now there was just this terrible, yawning emptiness. The funeral was the largest their community had ever seen. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects to Nathan Murphy, the man who had built a ranch from nothing, who had raised 4 fine children, who had loved his wife with a devotion that became legendary. But Felicity barely registered any of it. She moved through the days in a fog of grief, unable to believe that Nathan was truly gone. River was worried about his mother. She had always been so strong, so vibrant, but now she seemed diminished, as if part of her had died with Nathan. He tried to get her to eat, to rest, to talk about her feelings, but she just smiled sadly and said she was fine. But Felicity was not fine. She was drowning in grief, just as surely as she had once drowned in the Pecos River. Every room in the house reminded her of Nathan. Every object held memories. The rocking chair where he had sat, the coat hanging by the door, the side of the bed where he had slept. It was all too much. Sarah came to stay with her, insisting that Felicity should not be alone. But even her daughter's loving presence could not fill the void Nathan had left. One night, unable to sleep, Felicity went to the drawer where she kept her most precious possessions. She pulled out a small wooden box that Nathan had made for her decades ago. Inside were letters he had written her, pressed flowers from special occasions, a lock of baby River's hair. And at the bottom, carefully wrapped in cloth, was a photograph. It had been taken on their 25th wedding anniversary. They were standing in front of the house, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Nathan's arm was around her waist, and they were both looking at each other instead of the camera. The love in their eyes was palpable, even in the grainy black and white image. Felicity held the photograph to her chest and wept. She missed him so much it was a physical pain in her chest, an ache that would not go away. How was she supposed to go on without him? How was she supposed to find joy in a world that no longer contained Nathan Murphy? She stayed up all night, reading his letters, reliving memories. By the time dawn broke, she had made a decision. She would keep her promise to Nathan. She would find joy again. It would not be easy, and it would not be the same kind of joy she had known with him by her side. But she would try, because he had asked her to, and she had never been able to deny him anything. Slowly, painfully, Felicity began to rebuild her life. She threw herself into being a grandmother, spending long hours with the children, teaching them to read and garden and cook. She volunteered at the church, visited sick neighbors, helped organize community events. She kept busy, because being busy meant less time to think about the empty chair at the dinner table. But every January 15th, she rode out to the river alone. She stood on the bank where Nathan had pulled her from the ice 46 years ago, and she talked to him as if he were standing beside her. She told him about the grandchildren, about the ranch, about how much she missed him. And she swore she could feel him there, listening, loving her still. The years passed, and Felicity grew old without Nathan by her side. Her hair went completely white, her body stooped, her hands trembled. But her mind remained sharp, and her heart remained full of love for the man she had lost. In the summer of 1928, when Felicity was 70 years old, she fell ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a slow decline, her body finally giving up after years of missing its other half. Sarah moved back home to care for her, and the whole family gathered, sensing that their matriarch did not have much time left. On a warm August evening, with the windows open and a breeze bringing in the scent of summer grass, Felicity lay in her bed surrounded by loved ones. River held one hand, Sarah the other. The grandchildren crowded into every available space, and even a few great-grandchildren were there, though they were too young to understand what was happening. Felicity looked at each of their faces, these people who existed because of the choice she and Nathan had made 50 years ago. "Do not be sad," she said, her voice weak but clear. "I have lived a wonderful life. I had a love that most people only dream about. I had a family that filled my days with laughter and purpose. I have no regrets." "We love you, Mother," River said, tears in his eyes. "I know," she smiled at him, "and I love you, all of you. You are my greatest pride, my most important legacy. Take care of each other, love each other. That is all that matters in the end." Sarah was crying openly now. "What should we do, Mother? How do we let you go?" "You do not let me go," Felicity said gently. "You carry me with you in your hearts and your memories, just like I've carried your father with me these past 5 years. He has never left me, not really. Love does not die, Sarah. It transforms, but it never dies." She closed her eyes, suddenly tired, but there was a smile on her face, a look of peace that had been absent since Nathan's death. "I can see him," she whispered. "He is waiting for me, just like he promised. He is standing by the river, holding out his hand. I have to go to him now." "Mother, no," River started to say, but Felicity was already gone, her final breath leaving her body with a sigh. The room erupted in sobs, but Felicity heard none of it. She was walking toward a river that was not frozen but sparkling in eternal summer. And there, on the far bank, stood Nathan, looking exactly as he had when they were young. He was smiling, his hand outstretched, the ring gleaming on his finger. She ran to him, feeling no pain, no age, just joy. When she reached him, he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "I knew you would come," he said into her hair. "I have been waiting." "I am here now," she replied. "I am finally home." They stood by that eternal river, in that place beyond death, and they kissed with all the passion of their first kiss and all the tenderness of their last. And then, hand in hand, They walked away from the river, into whatever came next, together as they had always been meant to be. Back in the land of the living, the Murphy family mourned their beloved mother and grandmother. But they also celebrated her life and the incredible love story she and Nathan had lived. They buried her beside him in the small cemetery outside Santa Fe, under a cottonwood tree with a headstone that read simply, "Felicity Murphy, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Pulled from ice, saved by love." River took over as the head of the family, carrying on the traditions his parents had established. Every January 15th, the entire Murphy clan gathered at the river to remember the day Nathan had saved Felicity, the day that had started it all. They told the story to the youngest generation, making sure that no one ever forgot the power of one person's courage and love. The ranch continued to thrive for generations. The Murphy name became synonymous with integrity and hard work in New Mexico. But more than that, it became associated with love, with the kind of deep, abiding devotion that Nathan and Felicity had shown each other. Their story was told and retold, passed down through the years, a testament to the fact that love could conquer even death itself. Children who never met them knew their names. Great-great-grandchildren wore copies of Felicity's wedding ring, wanting to carry a piece of that legendary love with them. And on cold January nights, when the Pecos River froze over, people swore they could see two figures standing on the bank, holding hands, looking at each other with the same love that had defined them in life. Some said it was just tricks of the light. Others believed it was proof that some loves truly were eternal. But whether ghost story or legend or simple memory, the truth remained unchanged. Nathan Murphy had jumped into a frozen river to save a dying woman. He had placed his mother's wedding ring on her finger and claimed her as his own. And Felicity Morrison had chosen to claim him back, to build a life with this stranger who had saved her. From that single act of courage and faith had sprung a legacy of love that would endure for generations. They had proved that sometimes the craziest decisions were the wisest ones. That sometimes love at first sight was real. That sometimes two people were simply meant to find each other, no matter what obstacles stood in their way. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all, the proof that love was worth everything, worth risking death, worth building a life on faith, worth holding on to with everything you had. Nathan and Felicity Murphy had lived that truth every day of their lives together, and their descendants carried that truth forward into the future, a light that would never go out. The story ended not with death but with triumph, with the knowledge that love truly did conquer all, even the grave itself. And somewhere, in some eternal summer, two souls walked hand in hand beside a sparkling river, finally and forever together, just as they had always been meant to be.